with an intention to overhaul the already compromised electoral process in this country, Honorable Mathias Mpuuga has presented a bill on the floor of Parliament that seems to present a progressive reforms on the electoral laws and processes in this country. My name is Douglas Onen. I am your moderator for this conversation, and joining me to discuss this very interesting conversation is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help us unpack the conversation and put a student's perspective to the topic. So in no particular order, I'll begin from my extreme right, just quickly introduce themselves, and then we can get into the conversation. But before we get to the introductions, I'd just like to congratulate my brother Kwesiga, Emmanuel, for successfully launching his book. And we're looking forward to getting your insights on the issues that you also highlight in that particular book. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Drake. And good afternoon, our dear viewers. Like I said, Kwesiga Emmanuel is my name. I am a passionate writer, the author of The Magic of Successful Living, and my recent publication, All Has Changed. Glad to be here with you alongside my other panelists to discuss a rather interesting and pertinent issue about our constitution. Glad to be here.
Thank you. We're looking forward definitely to getting those wonderful insights, but also putting context to the conversation. The only lady on the show, you're most welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sharon Karungi. I'm from Kyambogo University. I'm glad to be here. And
a passionate debater. Thank you. Very happy to have you here. A gentleman that, if you hear his name, you'd think it's out of the earth. Aineplan Major.
All right. Thank you so much. My name is Aineplan Major. I'm from Kampala International University main campus, and I'm a passionate gladiator. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon.
Definitely. You must have a plan. We're looking forward to your wonderful insights. Let me start with you, Kwesiga.
Yes, please.
What Honorable Mathias Mpuuga presents to our Parliament, others could argue that it is a progressive framework that looks at overhauling our deeply compromised electoral process, and with the intent to cure the existence or the clause that are already pricking our constitution by the electoral process. He presents us with these reforms. And the reforms in this discussion, we shall look at the 6 key factors that particular reform focuses on. But without we go into the nitty-gritties of the conversation, just give us a quick overview of this reform and what it entails, and then we can get into the conversation.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to take the precursor. And of course, I do take the privilege. Something I must start with is the word constitution. Before we go into the particular subject matter, which is the Ugandan context we are looking at, let us first look at what a constitution is and what its origin is. The constitution originates originally from the ancient Greece, and around 1834 BC, we looked at philosophers, the likes of Aristotle, who studied Aristotle himself studied around 150 laws within the Greek cities. And at the end of it all, he concluded and he said that nations need to have one law that is binding on all of them. And from his study and the rest of the philosophers, nations adopted national laws, which national laws later became to be called the constitutions. Yeah. For example, we saw the United States of America promulgating its constitution in, I think, 1876. And so from the 18th, 19th, and 20th century, when most of the countries were beginning to have their independence from the colonizers, nations started formulating their own laws, and that gave basis for this constitution. As a matter of fact, nations realized that as they were getting their independence, they needed to have independence and self-leadership. And of course, that wouldn't be possible if they didn't have laws that govern them, that are binding on their citizens. So from that onwards, we saw countries coming up with a constitution. Now, from that to the Ugandan context, we saw our 1962 constitution that had the British backing that led us to to the independence. Then we saw the 1966 Constitution, the 1967 Constitution. Then later on, we saw the National Resistance Council establishing the Uganda National Commission, which later gave birth to the National Legislative Consultative Assembly that eventually had our constitution. Now, that said, now we go specifically and look at our constitution. We have our preamble. Our preamble gives us the fact that Uganda originally in history had political, economic, social instabilities, and the preamble puts it right that this constitution has come into place to harmonize these spheres of the country for us to have a very independent, a very peaceful country. So from the onset, we realize that this is what the constitution has come in place to do. Yes? Also, one important thing that I need to mention about constitution is that, of course, constitutions are classified. And for example, we have the flexible constitutions. And that, of course, the instance for that is that we all know that the law, like it is said, is a growing child, because times keep changing, and so as times change, the laws need to change. Therefore, when you have a flexible constitution, as times change, you can be able to change, which we call amendments. And as a matter of fact, our constitution has undergone through, about 4 amendments already, meaning that there was need. I would want to say there was need. So it is a flexible constitution that if it demands, we do the amendments. So that brings us to where we are today. We are saying that the Honorable Mathias Mpuuga is proposing amendments, which we are going to discuss in detail this particular afternoon. So basically that is where we are today. Like you said, I think my point is stopping right there. That's why we'll pick the entire discussion.
All right. Thank you. That's a very detailed precursor in regards to constitutionalism and the body of the constitution comes into play. Let me just bring in a Major before I get to Sharon. Major.
Yes, please.
Our constitution has gone through numerous reforms, but even before we go into the reforms, our country has gone through a couple of elections, and we are almost gearing that political season.
Yes.
And definitely, oftentimes when we're gearing to that point, we see a couple of things happening here and there.
Yes.
Others will term it as political in nature, of course, which it is. But then we now need to understand or underpin the questions that underlie in these reforms. Mathias Mpuuga, let's start from the first point that this particular reform is looking at. And the particular first point that his reform is focusing on is the aspect of reinstating or re-establishing term limits, presidential term limits. I just want you to pick up from there and assess the situation from the angle of us having back the term limits. Is it feasible? Is it possible?
Right, thank you so much. You know, they say before you put down a fence, first know the reason why that fence was built. Looking on the reforms Mr. Mathias Mpuuga is tabling on the floor of Parliament, a number of them, and beginning from what you've mentioned, the term limits. When this constitution was framed, actually it is so unfortunate that the framers of the constitution have not lived to appreciate its purpose, because we've seen it undergoing different amendments, of which we believe some of them, yes, were so much necessary. However, some of them were to bring what we can call self-centered politics in the country. And looking upon the democracy we need in the country, you know, one of the professors, Professor Albert Daisy, propounded that for a country to get away with dictatorial and amalgamania tendencies, power shall be removed from hands of men and women and put at the rule of the law. Yeah. So in all we do, in all we look at, we must be in line with the rule of the law. Is what we are doing in line with the rule of the law? Then coming back to the term limits now, we believe when they were the very people who framed the constitution, some of them again appeared on the floor when these term limits were being removed. So we believe these term limits, they are to bring what we can call a limit for either one not to come again. For example, if someone has been a member of parliament for a couple of terms, then we believe that person will have finished to reinstate all to do what he or she wanted. And it comes with a number of reforms whereby it is followed with another pin saying that the MPs should elect the president in such a way that even those limits, now, since he has brought it in line with MPs voting the president, but however, as my friend Emmanuel began with, to say we must respect the Constitution. Because Article 103 of the 1995 Constitution as amended gives us a right to universal adult suffrage. Meaning if you're saying MPs now should vote the president, then we are removing powers from the hands of the wananchi, the hands of the local people, to the MPs. And having witnessed the loopholes in the parliament, because we all Ugandans, we've been seeing what the MPs have been doing following 2017, when they came for referendum, they came, consulted people, and people told them, Tojukwatako. Some of them did the opposite. Those who told them Jukwateko, they did the opposite. So we no longer have much trust in those members of parliament, and we cannot, like I myself, I cannot stand to say that we should give them powers to vote on behalf of the Ugandans. After all, the first article in the Constitution says that power belongs to people. Meaning now we shall have shifted our powers from we ourselves, the wananchi, the local citizen, to an MP. An MP has something, or has what we can call financial background. He may not feel the impact or the line of what the local person is passing through. So following that of the limit of the term limits, yes, it is good and democratic that we can have term limits back to stop, at least if the country is under some state, what we can call state capture. Okay. Can it have some little time, some limited time? Can we suffer all those implications for a short time than suffering them for a long time? If it so happens that we have had greedy leaders, can we happen to reinstate the state in such a way and having term limits like other countries?
All right. Sharon, it's true that having term and age limits is important. In as much as our country lowered down those guardrails that were protecting the Constitution, that means it affected, or what other radical activists termed as, it wrecked the Constitution, because the guardrails were lowered down and they were totally shattered. Term limits, age limits removed. That means constitutionalism and rule of law was greatly affected. But what Mpuuga is proposing, that we need to reinstate and entrench term limits and age limits. So for context, trying to put back those guardrails that protect the Constitution and protects the rule of law. But other people could argue that even before we try to have term limits and age limits reinstated, why don't we focus on, first of all, addressing institutional issues, like proposing or having institutional checks and balances in place? Because when you have things like functional things like separation of power, you would have a functional, or even when you go ahead and reinstate and put back the term limits and age limits, the other institutions, once they have the capacity that is built, it would be proper, rather than just advocating for reinstatement of these term limits, knowing that the executive, anytime, any day, can wake up and say, you know what, let's remove this, it's not necessary. So I just want to pick your say on, is it proper, just enough for us to have the term and age limits reinstated, or we need to have deeper questions to understand the erosion in the institutional checks and balances?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Jack. On a personal view, I feel like, yeah, these things should be put back, like the age and term limits. But also, we need, even if they are put back at the end of the day, do really kind of benefit from it? That is like the biggest questions we could have at this kind of moment. Because when you look at what necessarily happens, or they do not even kind of, let's say the MPs do not actually, because we vote them into power to make right decisions for, on behalf of all of us, on things like on behalf of their constitutions and all that. But also, that necessarily means that what happens after they kind of put back this it's not going to remove the kind of challenges that, let's say, the Ugandans are facing at the end of the day, because it does not necessarily address the root cause problems that, let's say, the youth are facing or the elders are facing at the end of the day. So basically, I feel like putting them back and not putting them back is still the same thing, because the constitution right now of Uganda is like, it can be changed at any time.
But Sharon, if let's say you reinstate the term limits and age limits, that means a young person such as yourself, when the elders reach the limit they've reached, or they've reached a particular age, that means they will not run for office anymore, and it gives room for a young person such as yourself and all the other panelists on this discussion to run for office and have those reforms in place.
Yeah, that is true. But still, as I already told you, it does not address the root cause of the things that, let's say, let's go back now to the youth. Even if I'm represented out there in Parliament and all that, is it really going to address the things like unemployment that the youth are facing at the end of the day? No, because you see, the thing is, we vote people into power, but when you send them there, it's all about how they gain, not what other people gain out of the day. Let's say I've sent you there, Drake, to represent us as the youth. But when you reach there, you are going to be, because you're still going to find these adults there, because they feel like they are the people who are going to nurture you, they are the people going to show you ABCD and what you're going to do. At the end of the day, if you do not have a proper mindset or a proper goal on what you want, basically, you're going to, let's say, stick to what they are doing. So that is why a person like me, I'm going to go into Parliament, and even if they put the term limits and the age limits, yes, it is going to help the youth to, let's say, have like a greater voice to be heard, because basically the youth are the majority in the country, in Uganda. So yes, they will be heard, but are those reforms going to be able to help us to address the kind of issues that we have as the youth? No, because they are going to still be suppressed by the individuals up there, because even when the youths go there, it necessarily means that they are supposed to report to this kind of sectors or kind of division of labor that is created into this kind of reforms and all that. So if I'm supposed to report to, let's say, the speaker, or report to a specific department because I'm a youth and all that, are they going to consider me? Not really. At the end of the day, even if they put them back, I feel like it's still going to affect us the more, because a few people will be represented. Because if Mathias Mpuuga says, at least if you have this kind of a separation of power in things like having like 5 youth represented in in Parliament, yeah, that is very okay. But then, if there are only 5 out of the majority, because you see, most people are being silenced because of the majority and all that. And this youth, even if we are many in Uganda, or maybe we are being like the most in society, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be heard, because they feel we have nothing better to say. But as they say that you always listen to the elders, you always do that. That's why you think that they're going to put things like a bill for respecting elders and all that. But at the end of the day, if I'm to respect them, do I have a mandate? Do I have a reason as to why I need to respect them? That is why you're going to find a lot of chaos in things like Parliament. You're going to find a lot of chaos because you're seeing youth are trying to fight for their rights to be heard. They are going to fight for things that they really need them as themselves. But when it now goes back to the root cause of these kind of people in Parliament, you're going to find that at the end of the day, these people already have that technique on how to do specific things that you don't know. So basically, I feel like putting these reforms back, or putting these age limits, yes, it is going to help, because you're going to have representations from all sectors, but necessarily it's not going to address like the root causes that are causing this kind of effects to the youth and all that. Yeah.
Interesting. Emmanuel, let us just relate what Sharon has been arguing, that having the age and term limits is not synonymous to the solutions that we shall get in terms of having more employment opportunities or solving the problems that majority of the Ugandan young people are experiencing. Her argument is majority of the population are young people. Even though we restore and reinstate the age and term limits, it will not reciprocate to us having those having the solutions that we opt for. I just wanted to interrogate that further, and we have a conversation, because how I'm looking at this is we have, let's just imagine that we have a restoration of the age and term limits. That means you possibly can't run for president more than 3 times. You possibly can't run for parliament for more than 3 terms. That means there's room for one Aineplan measure after Kwesiga Emmanuel running for 3 terms to leave and give room for Measure to run for that particular position in a particular constituency. And the thing is, majority of us are young people. That means if you have 3 terms, those are 15 years gone. The next 15 years, Aineplan could possibly be 45, still a young man. That means he has the ability to still represent the views of young people. Yeah? Now that means it will still translate in proper representation, but not only in proper representation, even that perspective where we have young people having their affirmative action in terms of 5 members of parliament, we still have that representation. So won't those voices still be replicated in the solution that we get, or it's just good on paper and it's different in reality?
I like the question. In fact, even if you hadn't asked me that, I would still have to say something about it before I proceed. You and I, and the rest of the people in this room, will agree that what matters is substance and not the form. If I were to ask you, Drake, what is your major concern? Is it the leader or the leadership? And the rest of you, our concern, has it ever been the leaders or the leadership? I know you are going to argue and say that it is the leaders that provide the leadership. But what I am saying is that if you had a functional health system, a functional education system, a functional security system, it would be immaterial of who did this, but it would be material that the leadership is functional and effective. You get my point? What am I driving to? The point of term limits and presidential term limits. I understand that 99% or even more of the Ugandans are not in between. There seems to be no middle ground. It is either I am for term limits or against. And this is informed by our political affiliations. You will hardly find a Prom-7 person who will say, I am against limits. But also you will hardly find a person of a different political party who will say, I am in support of term limits. So you can see it is informed by our political affiliations and sides. But I have a contrary opinion. I think I should be one of the few that are in between. For me, whether term limits or no term limits, whether presidential or no presidential limits, I find that immaterial. For me, what is material and what would be a point of concern for me is how functional is the law in place. How democratic is our system? Because, in fact, if we had that off, if we had the presidential limits back reinstated, I feel at one point it would infringe on a person's merit. Because what if you had a very strong candidate, a strong president who has served, and it is 2 or 3 terms depending on what the terms dictate, and is a strong leader, and you still like this person as a nation, but because of the legal bearing, the person will not qualify to stand again. He's automatically knocked out of the system simply because they've met or they cannot meet that criteria. My point is, if you had free and fair elections, now you see I'm getting to the side of the functionality and effectiveness of the law in place. If we have a constitution that provides for free and fair elections, if we have a constitution that provides for independence of the judiciary, independence of the legislature and the executive, and non-interference, of course with the limited balance and checks, but we had that really function and implemented. That means that you would have a free and fair election in that even if this person had intentions of standing for the next 5 terms, but because the laws in place are functional and democracy is indeed exercised, this person will automatically be knocked out of the system because the law is followed and implemented. You get my point, that the system itself would knock you out because you are incompetent and you don't deliver to people's expectation, rather than you being a more competent person and just the laws knock you out. Because now look at this point also. Imagine I have a selfish intent And the law already puts it clearly that I will not be a president more than 2 terms. And so I am sure whether I do good or bad, I'll be out of office after 2 terms. Trust me, if I really don't intend to serve, I'm not going to serve. But a person who has intentions of standing for subsequent more terms, I feel this person will be propelled to do a little more service because they want to have people's attention and buy people's trust, because they know their term of office is dependent on people's perception of their service. You get where I am getting. So I find that immaterial. In fact, I am neither for term limits or against them. But my point and emphasis is on our democracy and how we exercise our laws as a nation.
I think, in my opinion, I would say, how I understand your argument. You're looking at, okay, yes, the democracy, but above all is leadership. What do we offer in terms of our leadership? Even when we have the term limit or we don't have the term limit, at the end of the day, is the leadership functional? Do they deliver? Which I think addresses the argument of Sharon, that even if, let's say, we have, because she argues that we can have the reforms and still not have the results, the problems will still be existent and there will not be solutions. But Emma's argument, it stands on top of the tree, in that it is a systematic problem in the system, the leadership question that we are experiencing. But nonetheless, we have other reforms to still interrogate, but I think it will still rotate or oscillate on that pendulum of leadership, which at this point in time I'd just like to engage with you, Sharon. Among the reforms in this country, understand that we operate on a social contract theory. That even when you are imprisoned, you have the right to vote. But our constitution or our body of the law doesn't give prisoners the leeway to vote. But unfortunately, in the 21st century, you find that even when you're Ugandan and you're abroad, you do not have the capacity to cast your vote. Yet countries like Rwanda, our neighbor here, you saw how embassies were filled in the various embassies to cast their votes. Now, that is something that Mathias Mpuuga in these electoral reforms he proposes, that we need to have Ugandans in prisons and Ugandans in the diaspora cast their vote, which I think, in my opinion, is a good one. How would you go about that, or what are your opinions?
Yeah, thank you, Drake. So, still, it goes back to the kind of leadership that we have. At the end of the day, even if these reforms are there, but without reinstating or without reappointing or without re-getting these kind of people in the electoral commission, certain things are not going to actually change at the end of the day. Because you see, the same people who are there are going to be there year in, year out and all that. But also, as he says, these individuals have a right to voting or a right to choose which kind of leader they want at the end of the day, despite the fact that they are out of their country, despite the fact that they're in prisons and all that. But now when it comes to our country, this is why I told you that when it comes to our sort of constitution, it is never stable. If someone wakes up in the morning and they feel like a certain article needs to leave the constitution, they will actually remove it. Because yes, you're going to have things like debating around it, should it be removed, should it stay and all that. But at the end of the day, does it stay there? No. Despite whether we say no or not, it is still going to leave that kind of constitution. But also why I feel like these people already have a right or have a mandate to choose the kind of leader, because they're not, yeah, they have committed crimes when it comes to people in prisons and all that. I'm actually happy with Mathias Mpuuga trying to advocate for that reform, because I do not see the reason as to why someone, because they already have a right to education, because those people in prison do study. But if they have a right to education, why can't they have a right to voting the people they kind of want at the end of the day? It is not like they do not know who they want or they are going to be biased at the end of the day. No, they have a sober mind to choose who they want to lead them at the end of the day. But also, in our country, as he already says, the kind of leadership that we have is not a leadership that basically wants to serve the majority. They serve according to how they feel it should be. Because you're not going to urge why Drake is going to do what? even if I'm a guild president, I'm going to do things in my best interest, not in the best interest of the university. Yes, I may, during those kinds of campaigns and all that, MPs show you, or this kind of leaders show you a lot that we are going to do ABCD, ABCD, but when they reach there, do they actually implement? The issue in our country is implementation. Most of the articles, most of the reforms stop on paper. Do not be shocked if actually Mathias Mpuuga's reforms, the good ones that we feel like are okay, stop on paper, because the implementation system in our country is that bad that they are going to keep on saying, oh, we are going to do so. It will be tabled in Parliament, but it will stay there until we all forget about it, be like, oh, it failed. But why I feel it is necessary for these people, because as a government, each person, as a government, you have the mandate to protect your citizens. The same way you have a mandate to protect your citizens, you have a mandate to make sure that your citizens are satisfied at the end of the day. So basically, why they have a right to do what? To choose to vote, and even if they're out of the country, they have a right to vote their kind of leaders because they are citizens of Uganda. I do not see the reason as to why they actually don't vote. They do not give you maybe because we could say they are punishing them because of the crimes they have committed at the end of the day, but that is not valid enough for someone not to constitute their kind of right. So basically, I feel that is like the best reform I would advocate for if I was actually supporting Mpuuga in all his reforms and all that. And if the implementation system of Uganda was okay, that would actually be much better. But still, even if they vote, my biggest worry or my biggest issue is, even if you have all these kind of reforms, if these kind of reforms are actually going to be implemented, that necessarily means that you have to reconstruct the entire electoral commission at the end of the day, because these are the people we feel like we can trust and all that. So if we do not actually trust them, we feel like, oh, we are going to vote at the end of the day, a specific candidate will still pass through. We just need that kind of transparency between this kind of electoral commission. So
okay. What stands out in your argument is we lack the implementation spirit, which would would prompt me to engage in a plan that does the Museveni regime have the political will to implement the integration of prisoners, but also the diaspora, to cast a vote? Will they have the political will? Because, as she rightly put it, the prisoners have the right to cast a vote. But concerns have been coming out of the regime that, you know, they do not have the resources to engage people in the diaspora. But ideologically speaking, people have written that possibly they're afraid of proper ways of them rigging votes, or they're afraid to get, you know, other forces interfering with the electoral process. But do you think the Museveni regime really has the political will to implement that? I know you're a cadre, so
all right.
guide us on the same.
All right, thank you so much. We need to first analyze different issues in the government currently. That is a very good reform because it aligns with the fundamental human rights. Article 8 gives us a right, gives every citizen an equal right like the other, meaning they also share the same rights we do have. So they should be able to cast a vote. And as you know, by the way, a ballot is much stronger than a bullet. But in this case, we are looking at one thing. Even if they casted the vote, would we have the electoral system functioning the way Ugandans would want it to be? Because there is even casting the vote. But do we trust that process in those prisons? Coming back to the issue of resources, I think it would be much more easier for prisoners to cast a vote than actually any other Ugandan. Because they are in one place. It is like a school.
yeah.
If they said this is a polling station, it would be so much easier. Because they are in one place. They wouldn't even take an hour. But what we are looking upon, who is going to supervise these elections? Because we know prisons, yes, it should be some organ that should be also independent without any interference. Like, as Emmanuel said, it should all rotate around the rule of the law. We should have powers separated. But are the powers separated in the country, right? We have checks and balances. We know the judiciary will do some work there. But at the time of the supervision, it will become more tricky to supervise these voters in prisons. Because Ugandans have developed a mentality that many who are in the government, who are in these organs, who are in the police or the UPDF, many of them, they are pro-NRM, what we can say. So how about, won't we get issues with opposition saying NRM has conflicted on the process of voting within the cells? And this comes to now to the change, the general change. If they voted, would they change a much more percentage on the electoral results of Uganda? Because may I believe, all what we need is an independent electoral commission. If the electoral commission was independent, then we wouldn't even see the reason to why the prisoners do not cast the vote. But currently, we do not have much trust in the electoral commission, because where you find in a state, a president runs as a president. Panelists, fellow panelists, believe me, in Uganda, a president goes to campaign with all privileges of a president. So a president is campaigning, a president is a candidate. In the same time, a president has more powers in appointing the chairperson of the electoral commission. So in that way, you find that the chairperson electoral commission, all the people, all the members of the electoral commission are much aligned to the state, or to the head of the state. Then that independence, however much we have some kind of checks and balances, but the powers are not separated. So even if we said these guys are going to vote, they are going to cast their vote in the prisons, we really don't believe in positivity of the results from there. That's what I can submit on that.
All right, interesting. Emmanuel, I know you'd possibly have a response to what my brothers here submitted upon, but as maybe you have a response to that, I'd also like to first tackle a very interesting reform which many Ugandans are not aware of. A few days from now, United States, actually 1 month from now, United States will be having its presidential elections. As you're aware, the president usually has a running mate. A running mate in that person will become the vice president. Now, the reforms that Mathias Mpuuga is proposing, that we need to also have, we also need to have a running mate for the president. Other people have termed it that could be cosmetic, but it's not our problem. The problem in Uganda is not that we do not have a functional deputy president or vice president. Those are way beyond. We are having bigger problems than having a running mate. So do you think possibly having a running mate for a president as vice president or deputy president is plausible, or would it even solve our problems? But what would it look like?
Good question. Now, you see, when we are on such panels, for example, as a matter of fact, we are not discussing party matters, but rather national matters. And so what we employ in this context is our objective lens and consciousness of how we analyze these particular issues. Now, looking at that, as a matter of fact, like you put it, that's the equivalent of a vice president. The difference here is that this one is voted for, but the one we have is appointed. I understand that when that happens, I don't know, but maybe the Constitution would now provide for powers of the vice president. But in this case, we are looking at a person who in them, they feel they've been voted by the people, and so their subscription is not to a top authority. That even when their powers might be almost similar, the powers of the president now, who is appointed by the president, I mean the vice president who is appointed by the vice president, and now vis-a-vis one who has been voted for. That even if their duties are almost the same, or even if nothing changes in this context, but the diligence and the dedication with which they serve is quite different. That here I know I am serving a master, and this is one master. And on the other hand, I know I am serving the electorate, which is the people. So it means you are not conflicted. I tell you, the vice president today will only serve, or at least this is my opinion. I do not want to call it facts. It's not binding on everyone. It's my opinion. But I feel the president today only serves the interests of the president.
Yeah.
But I feel if we had a function and the president is elsewhere, say abroad, and I know this is a national function that needs to be attended to, and I'm the vice president and I'm in the country, it's not important that the president tells me to go and represent him. It's not important, but I will go. Even if it were an opposition kind of event, but for as long as I feel it has a national objective, I will. Because I don't subscribe to a person, but rather I subscribe to people. So I feel it's quite important. And most importantly in it, as he puts it, the Mathias Mpuuga, how he wants to have it, is that this should never come from the same region. You see, on so many discussions and talks we've had, we've really debated about the issue of tribe and the difference in this country. Over 56 different languages. You are here in Kampala today, you run to Gulu and you feel you're out of Uganda. I mean, you can't even go to a shop and buy bread. There is a difference.
In our defense, at least we speak very good English.
At least even when that's the case, but I know they are remote
Definitely.
Yes.
So this is a difference. Which difference we are trying sometimes to cover up and say we are trying to fight it. But even when that's the case, I feel what we can do about it is to find a better solution than trying to say that we can do away with it, because it's not that easy. It's not that easy that in the next 20 years you'll have the 56 plus tribes speaking the same language. Meaning that this difference is not something we are about to work with. But the point now is, how do we find a better mechanism of harmony? Because now what he says is that this should be from different regions of the country. I feel if, for example, you have the person who has won the presidential elections from the west and the one for vice president is, say, in the north, these people will feel a part of the system. By the way, it might not even matter if the system actually delivers to them or not. But the mere feeling of we are also in the system is enough to create comfort among the citizens. And knowing that this is a thing that has come by just by a mere by an election and not a person's preference. I will tell you, even if the president is in the west like he is, and he chooses a person, say, from the east, the people in the north will say, why not from the north? Because this has been a person's choice and not a choice of the entire population. So I feel that it would equally really be good on those
on tribal grounds.
Yes.
On tribal grounds, it's good, but
Yes.
on the other ground, whereby it would lead to a conflict of interest in terms of who would hold what power. Because our constitution provides the office of the vice president directly performs those obligations that are assigned to that office by the president. So if at all the president tells the vice president, do this, do that, those are the functions the vice president performs. But in this case, if you're to have the office of the vice president, that means would need to have specific duties and responsibilities for that particular office, which in my opinion could also be another room of conflict, because we have seen that the executive in its own self, in the body of the president or in the office of the president, runs everything in this country. Yeah. So it's a serious one to interrogate it in that manner. But
about that very thing, and I really do understand. But like I said, I agree with you that that would bring in another thing that you and I probably don't know. If we might need to make amendments in the law or something. But as a matter of fact, most times leadership works on competition. The same that applies in the economic world. The nations that are doing far better in the economy and money making are because they are competing. China competing against the USA, the dollar competing about the rand and all that. So competition gives efficiency in production. But now look, given our system, we have the president, or the regime that is in power, and so it has opportunity to block passage and access to any power instrument or possibility to the other intending power holders. But also, the vice president, who we are looking at in this context, is under the government, meaning that this particular system has no competition. It has no competition from the inner sources, and it has no competition from the external forces, because this is blocked and this is compromised.
Okay.
Let me finish this. The vice president is compromised because you have the power that chose you on top. So you have to serve this power's interests. As a matter of fact, this is not discussed in abstract, but it's reality. But also you have the opposition that is out of the system because you are in the house and you have the door closed. You get it? But in this system that the Honorable Mpuuga proposes, you would have two systems, and are all in power. And so I feel it is out of the competition and pressure of knowing that as a vice president, I mean as a president, if I am performing less than the vice president actually, then the country is actually going to perceive so as being the, so out of this competition. And remember, this is the force that is competing with you in service delivery, but you cannot kick it out of the system because it's not accountable to you, but to people. You are all two people and in almost a similar position. So the competition is who delivers better than who. Because you will kill people or you will be anti-people, and I will take your weakness as my advantage. For me, I'll do the opposite. You will definitely have to reform if you need to keep in the system. So I find this, what we would prima facie call conflict, a rather force that would drive us to competition in leadership and prosperity, I believe, in my sincere opinion.
For context, the Mpuuga Electoral Reform proposal, as you rightly put it, let me just categorize it. It looks at introducing a second-tier parliament. And in that second-tier parliament, which means he proposes we have 39 legislators from the original 39 districts. Yeah? And those 39 legislators will report or be under to the deputy vice president, to the vice president. Now, how this will work is that these 39 original districts and 39 legislators directly reporting to the vice president means that there is already a government within a government. And what Emma is trying to argue is we shall have more, possibly more effectiveness, possibly. But looking at our current situation, realistically speaking, with a parliament that is already weakened, with a parliament that in the face of the people seems not to deliver, is just a house, as people term it, house of thieves, or a den of thieves, that's how people term it. Will it even achieve its goal? It's like you're now creating another government within a government and just creating more administrative expenditures. Major?
Yes, please.
But let me first get from Emma.
Well, I really perfectly understand your point. But at this point, if the alternative to that is what we are having, the alternative to the conflict, because you seem to suggest that would be creating power within power. And so now we are saying that at the moment, we only have one power.
Yeah.
But if I were to ask you, has that been of any importance? For example, has it served to expectations that we should preserve that status quo? Answer the question, Mr. Moderator.
You tell us.
If it has not, in my honest opinion, of course it would be too irrational for me to say that it has completely not achieved, but I feel the presence of rivalry in service and what would think is a conflict would be better than this harmony among the leadership that we have, because of it. I mean, it is really so comfortable. You are at liberty to do all you can, and you are not accountable to anyone because you have the system all in your hands.
Yeah.
So I feel it would be better if it's kind of a pool, because then the competition would be who is going to be more appealing to the people, because you are two forces, meaning that if what you lose is what I will gain. You get?
Yeah, you do.
So it's at the end of the day is who pulls more than who. Yes. So I think I don't know if I have a radical element within me, but I feel that would be better than what we call peace.
All right, I'll just quickly go for a break, then I'll come back to Sharon and Major, then we can interrogate that further and look into the other reforms as well. The conversation is underway, and the panel is doing us justice, and it's quite interesting, but we'll just quickly go for a short break. Be right back. See you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that break. Right before we went into the break, we were discussing students' perspective on Honorable Mathias Mpuuga Electoral reform proposals. Just before we went into the break, we were interrogating the proposal to introduce a second-tier parliament that is headed by the deputy vice president, which still falls under the reforms, which before we just broke off, my brother Emmanuel was saying that it would be a very good move in that we can have a more functional and propelling government forward, because if one other arm is not working properly, the other will definitely take on those wins, those losses, and win on that. But let me just get your thoughts, Sharon and Major, but I'll start with Major. Among the reforms, or among the proposals in the reforms that Mathias Mpuuga proposes, is a reduction in the size of parliament. And that's an argument that has been looming among the citizenry for quite some time. In his proposal reform, he argues that we need to reduce the size of parliament to around 280. That is more than half, cutting the size of parliament more than half, which in my opinion I think would be great. But then that means taxpayers' money would go to waste because they're already expanding parliament. But let's just speak your thoughts.
All right, on such a reform, we have to consider different aspects. One, it comes in with the taxpayers' money vis-a-vis the resources. Because the parliament we have to first now visit the constitution. How about its validity and how about its importance? I can say they are very many, and yet the Lord, they are not even doing what they are supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Because where you find we have members of parliament who are more than 400, even 500 and plus. This is something that one of them said, how can I represent my constitution in just a mere 3 minutes that are given to me on the floor? So this means the members of parliament are so many that they do not even get the efficient time on the floor of parliament to represent their people. However much some may opine and say that since now districts are many, constituencies are many, it will bring some effective representation. However, yes, you are represented in parliament, yes. But he who is representing you, is he bringing something on the table? Because even they are not given time. You will find an MP takes a month without saying something in parliament.
But others just don't want to say things in parliament.
Why? Because they even feel, even if they raise the hand, nothing will be done. This is the parliament.
I think
I would want to I would ask that you find another defense to that. Because I don't think that would do. Because now, look, for instance, if I asked you to mention the active members in parliament, you wouldn't mention beyond 15 people.
Of course, there are very few.
So now, how do you relate that to the fact that there is an individual who doesn't even labor to put their hand up, and there is this person who speaks for 2 minutes, but 10 times in
In a
our
session.
entire
Yes,
city.
to
This person has
mention
communicated.
like Honorable Semuju.
Yes.
Yes.
So I feel that really might not,
Yeah,
in my
really
opinion, might not hold so much.
Even if it may hold less meaning, but the fact is the parliament is accommodating a lot of people, and this goes around with the resources of the country, because you first look at what an MP is given to. When we are done with the elections, an MP is entitled to a certain amount of money to go and have a vehicle, to have some posh house to live in, is equited and given to security, and all that, allowances, phones, everything. How about that taxpayers' money that is going around within the house, that at the same time is not delivering what people would have expected from them? Because in the face of the eyes of the citizens of Uganda, the parliament is almost having a lot of loopholes. It is not delivering to the expectations of people. Yes, we have them. There are many in the parliament. This comes again with the resources. Even if there are many, but there are no available resources to construct roads. Still, roads won't be constructed because there are many MPs in the parliament.
So you would argue and say that reform is a good one?
Yes, it is a good one. If one person represented at least the 3 constituencies in one, like they are cut, and then we remain with at least the chairman LC5s. We are not eliminating these constituencies completely. They can stay, but we have one person representing them in parliament. It would at least have the national cake divided into different sectors, because we have even witnessed some of them who even take a couple of weeks, not even weeks, but months without appearing in parliament.
But you vote them. Anyway, let me just get to Sharon. Still on the size of parliament, the argument that has been raised that there's a huge public administration cost when it comes to maintaining legislators, but also the lifestyle. We understand that our legislators are well paid, I must say, and they are accustomed to a very luxurious lifestyle, and that comes at a cost, and at whose cost? The taxpayers' cost. Now let us just look at this from the lens of a young Ugandan who is not sure what the future will hold for him, because one, employment opportunities are scarce. But even if employment opportunities are scarce, that young man doesn't have the employable skills that they need, because they did not receive quality education, because our education systems are whack, because they are not properly funded. And this young man is frustrated. Now, that is how I want to take this debate, because we can reduce the size of parliament. Let's say we reduce the size of parliament to 292, according to the proposal by Honorable Mathias Mpuuga. Will this have a trickle-down effect on the services that we must get to be a fully equipped citizen in this country?
You see, even in the kind of country that we are living in, I feel like even if they reduce the legislative people in parliament, the expenses are still going to be much, because they are going to start giving excuses. Oh, we are handling a very big constitution, we are handling around 3 of them. So basically, I'm supposed to, my salary has to increase, my well-being has to, like, at least they'll play a card of mental health. Like, my mental health is more beneficial to all this. So that wouldn't really necessarily help out. Okay, yeah, even if it was to help out, it doesn't help out at a bigger expense. Because now, if you see, right now, even when there are many, they still get what they want. If they feel like okay, now because they had brought a proposal of, you see how they give them cars. So if you've been in parliament before, they'll only give the new entrants, like the only new entrants. But have they really implemented that? Like, you still receive the same salary, you still receive the same benefits as the other people who have been there. But also, let's go back to the service delivery. They have failed to, let's say, deliver when there are many. What makes us think that when they are reduced, it's actually going to be more beneficial, or it's actually going to help out on things like service delivery, things like increasing funding in terms of the healthcare system, or things like the education system? One, what we need to understand is that even when we reduce them, there are going to be other complaints. At least they'll find a way on how to bring in those expenses. Be like, okay, because we are few, we need more funding. Because we are few, we need to increase on our salary because we are working too much. So even when they are working less, they'll still ask for money. So what makes us think that basically if they reduce these people, but on a brighter side, that would actually, I would actually first refuse on what he says that some people don't speak because there are many in parliament. That's not so true, because I feel like, since we are going into the electoral season, they are going to start releasing those documents of how many times you have spoken in parliament, how many times have you appeared and all that. At a point in time, that is why I tell you, these people don't feel like they are responsible for anything. At a point in time when you feel like you are supposed to be accountable for why you have not gone into this sitting, because now you hear excuses of, oh, we are so many, I have nowhere to sit. Like, that can also be an excuse. But when you come and tell us that, oh, we are not speaking because we are many, even when you're few, you will still not speak, because how many people actually speak? You find some who are speaking, it's because they're on a committee, let's say the education committee, on the health committee, and it's like a mandate. But literally those guys are like forced to, let's say, represent, to go and represent their constituents at the end of the day, which is actually more problematic because they do not show that kind of interest. That is why I told you, these people that we have that we push into governance, or the people we push into to parliament to represent the constituencies or the citizens, and not actually, if let's say out of 50%, it's like 15% who are actually doing so. Actually 15 is also a big number. But now when we go back now, because they don't really care. That is why we told you. So even if they all start chaos and all that, it is really okay to find that I don't care whether Mulago is going to be funded, because my children are going to fall sick, and because I'm earning a good salary, or because I'm having a good car and all that, my children are going to go, they are going to literally go abroad. Like, that is why they are less concerned about certain things when it comes to the country. But also, still on the brighter side of, if they reduce these things, if well implemented and be like, okay, they should reduce them as Mathias Mpuuga is suggesting, that necessarily means that if they are they do not actually increase on their luxurious life, or being like, okay, we want more things and all that, that money that actually would have gone to those other MPs that have been scrapped off, necessarily means that you could now be able to put it back to things like education, or to put it things in the healthcare system. But the problem is, the people who are serving, some of these people are way so greedy when it comes to things like money. Like, that is why you're going to have things like corruption and all that. And people are going to look at it like it is something very normal for them to, because they will actually create an excuse. As you said, someone who is actually illiterate will not understand that, okay, I'm paying, taxes are being paid, and like, people having a luxurious life at the expense of my taxes, yeah? But if, let's say, they come and start giving you a budget of, oh, we are going to put this money into A, B, C, D, like there is a lot of terms that are going to be used that I personally, who is someone who is illiterate, who has not gone into this kind of education system, won't understand. And I will actually believe they would rather create a reason as to why this money should actually stay into this kind of system, because they feel it is going to help them. But also, I feel like if they reduce these people, yeah, let's give it a benefit of the doubt that, oh, if they reduce them, these people are going to speak out their minds on how their constituencies are performing, or how, like, that speaking out on an increased service delivery. But the service delivery still will be less, because they feel like someone is going to literally go there and be like, okay, I'm just going to go there for a specific term limit or a specific time to do what I feel like I can get out of that, because that burden is now going to be so much for them. And that's why you're going to have things like competition. Yeah, even if he says that competition is a bit, that kind of fair competition, or that kind of good competition that he's talking about. But you see the problem with that kind of competition that you're now going to create after you have reduced this kind of people, because now you have to compete to make sure you serve to the expectations of these people. But then the problem with this is that these people are going to have a challenge in terms of service delivery. They're going to tell you that we are not receiving enough funding to serve to the, let's say, to the divisions that they have made. They're going to create reason as to why they feel they cannot do that. That is why the issue of competition is now going to create a lot of more confusion in Parliament, because now who is addressing to who is addressing to the other. Because if I have an issue and I'm answerable to you, and he has an issue and is answerable to him. So him coming and telling me that, oh, ABCD, I'll be like, no, I'm not answerable to you. So that kind of communicating or that kind of issue won't actually work, because there's going to be a lot of pull and the rule and divide and all that kind of system. So that's why I feel like the reducing of MPs here would be okay, but it comes with other consequences that we are not, that as a country we are not able to defend. Because if you're going to say that you're reducing them because you want to increase more money for salary for education, it's still, they are going to create a reason as to why that money should actually stay in their system than sending it back down the side.
All right, thank you. Emma, among the other reforms, as Major and Sharon have rightly put it, reduction of the size of Parliament is somewhat a good one, and would also help in terms of availing resources to improve other sectors of our country. But let's look at this also now from a legal lens. Among the reforms, Mathias Mpuuga is proposing that the ordinary voters should be able to drag or challenge the votes of the president in courts of law. The situation at the moment is that an ordinary voter cannot challenge the electoral process of the office of the president or the elections after the president has been elected. The only person who can go ahead and challenge those votes is a particular candidate who was running also for the office of the president. Now, among those reforms is Mathias Mpuuga is suggesting that we need to have Ugandans drag the office of the president in court when they want to challenge the elections. From hindsight, one would argue that this would improve rule of law in this country, but also it helps in terms of people airing out their views on dragging the office of the president. But let us look at it from this angle, in a more pragmatic manner, from a legal lens. You know, when you're dragging the office of the president in court, particularly when you want to challenge elections, in terms of civil procedure, it goes in a very limited period of time. And the ordinary Ugandan being given the opportunity to take the office of the president in court, how feasible will this be? Will they even follow the laws? But even very few people understand this. So let us understand that, Emma.
Thank you so much, Drake. Allow me within 2 minutes or less respond to their point. The issue of reduction of legislators in Parliament. Like, to that, for me, I would keep my stand. My stand is just the same. That my point is not on the many versus the few, but the performance of whichever the number. If I were to ask you, is it because of the so many legislators that we still have poor roads? Is it because of the so many MPs that we still have no medicine in hospitals and health centers? Is it because of the so many MPs that medical interns are not paid or even given internship placements? Is it because of so many MPs that people in Kitezi can still be buried by garbage in the era we are in today? For me, the point is beyond the number of legislators, but my point still would be on the quality. That be it the many, or the few, the 20, or the many, the thousands, what do they actually do? Because that's not my question, I would love to end it there. But my point is, the number is not material, but the performance of that number. Drake, I hope you get me on that, the performance. So, that's my point there. Your question. You know the Constitution, right away and from Article 1, sovereignty of the people. Its intention and deliberate that it starts right away from the onset. It gives people mandate that people shall be governed by their consent. Of course, that goes to them choosing who they feel should vote them, and that whatever the constitution will be in fulfillment of the desires of the people. And of course, in chapter 4, when we look at the human rights, including but not limited to right to fair hearing, equality before the law, and my emphasis on equality before the law. That irrespective of your skin color, gender, which is same as sex, if economic status, whether rich or poor, we are all Ugandans, and that the law should treat us equally. So meaning that if you qualify to be a Ugandan under citizenship, which is also in the constitution, then you are Ugandan. So I feel it is immaterial that I am an MP or I am a judicial officer. It is immaterial that I am a peasant. At the end of the day, under the constitution, we are the same. We are all Ugandans. And anything to do with our leadership does not affect just the rich person or anyone in a leadership structure, but also the man back in the village. Because we are all affected by leadership, we should all be given the same standing to take any measure to try to remedy that. Because we are all victims at the end of the day. So then, why should it be that out of the so many Ugandans, you have either a particular organ or individuals in a particular status and class who should have the locus to have a legal action against such a serious matter that affects all of us? If it affects me, why shouldn't I be part of those that can take a step towards it? If I am a Uganda and I qualify to vote, why do I just qualify to vote but not to follow up on how my vote is treated? If I am a poor man, for example, from my remote Zimbabwe district, and I have exercised my franchise, I voted, I qualify, I'm in the voters register, but then that after voting, for you can't go beyond this, irrespective of whether rigging has been done and you can see it, but you do not have authority. All you can do is voting and you make no follow-up. So where is the equality? I am looking at this contradiction now. Are you saying we are equal before the law? Yes. Then why am I barred from taking a legal action against what is my right to exercise? So I see a contradiction. Because I see a contradiction, I find this as a remedy to the same. Because this is a right, so there should be a remedy for failure to observe the same, for an act or omission on the same right. So I find this really so appealing that any Ugandan, for as long as you can be, of course the legalese and the technicalities will always be there, of you have to be this, the time span and whatnot, but for as long as me, I feel I am able to meet that, and indeed I go ahead and meet the same, it should go through, because why not? And also that gives the opportunity to so many of us. It means that as I am doing it from Zimbabwe, someone else is in Kasese and doing the same, because we are all.
Want them to frustrate the judiciary in terms
what about
of having very many cases filed at the same time.
No.
In law, they would term it as frivolous, and there would be frivolous cases because you have someone in Zimbabwe doing the same, someone in Gulu doing the same, someone in Nakapiripiri doing the same, on various different grounds. Would it be frivolous in nature?
You see, anything to do with the human rights, I want to think, is not a thing of convenience. Because now, you wouldn't tell me that you would rather not do hectic work, that you would rather suffocate a person's right at the expense of you going the hard way. I feel that's not a better option, because this is a person's right. And also in law, we could, because it's the same petition, if I should call it, the subject matter is one. You could have it, for example, combined, and it is almost just a similar suit. Yes, because it's the same subject matter in this instance.
I think now the hardest thing would be what yardstick would be to make sure people can maybe file a representative suit, because now the law part will come in, because it's maybe the cause of action is the same, and we have very many Ugandans who want to file an electoral petition. So it could be now a question of the procedure, which in my opinion would be a problem. But also in that, when understanding the procedure of the law being a problem, then the issue of experts would handle that experts. It would be expensive on the judiciary itself, because if it's the argument of human rights, which is, in my opinion, it's a good reform. But then in terms of resources, which already claim we do not have, it's expensive.
Your issue is on the possibility and the applicability of the same. And of course, I do agree with you to that extent that it's not an easy process. Because if you really had it open, and it's an open door, you would really have every person who has a bias against any person who has won coming into instituting suits and whatnot, which I associate with you. But of course, because there is a law and the law proves just everything. Meaning that by the time you go beyond, for example, the magistrates court, if it's, I mean, whatever level, by the time you get to the high court and whatnot, then you have really potentially implying suits or cases. But for me, I think it's still a better way to go, in as much as it's not easy. Because like I said, it's not a matter of convenience, but to deliver as expected, especially in the legal implication and structure.
All right. As we edge towards the end of our conversation, Aineplan,
Yes,
the last reform looks at having the declaration of the presidential results at the national level before transmission to the national tally system, which in my opinion I think is progressive in nature. And this question would go to you and Sharon. People have raised concerns that oftentimes when people raise numerous concerns that votes were rigged before they reached the national tally center. Would this be a better front, because we're trying to promote transparency, and that is among the major core values and principles of the Electoral Commission, accountability and transparency? Would it be a good fit having all the presidential votes tallied at the district level before transmitted to the national level?
All right, transparency goes with no secrecy. I think it would have no problem if these votes are tallied at the district before reaching the national level. Because if I have cast my ballot, then if you make the longer you make the process, the more we shall not trust the process. Because how about if my vote is coming from Ntungamo district? How am I sure that before I know that it is safe in Ntungamo, it is going to be safe at the national level? So at least if I knew that it is safe right away from Ntungamo, then I would get to know that, all right, then you wait for those which are coming from Karungi, for those which are coming from Karamoja at the National Tally Center. Then we get one if we are to promote what we call transparency and democracy in that.
Okay. Sharon, what's your say?
Basically, I feel like that is very okay, because you see, if you put something up there before I actually know what has actually happened in my constituency or in my district, how will I actually trust the process? Because you see, as he says, the more time you give something, the more time you give it for people or different individuals to do whatever they feel like with those kind of ballots. I'm not saying that it would happen, but there are more chances to do so. But also let's look at this, that even when you put it out there, as I already told you, if we want this to work, you need to first actually reform or reconstruct the Electoral Commission. Like, you need to first change all those people, because they're doing more harm than good. So at a point in time that I do not trust the Electoral Commission itself as an individual, what makes them think that I'm actually going to trust my ballot to the national level? Because these people, you see, it is easy to hold these individuals at district level accountable, because you know who to approach.
Yes.
But when you go up there, you do not know actually. The bureaucracies are way so many that you have to pass through person A to reach person Z, then come back to A. Like you see, but it's easy because people already know that, yeah, so and so has voted, because you know, in this district, yes, my ballot has been there. So people have been knowing that, yeah, I voted for this person and my vote has been counted. Than putting it out there and be like, okay, because you're going to put there like he's going to vote for someone else, I'm going to vote for someone else, but at the end of the day, they are going, the winner would not, the one you expect to win, because you know the majority have done so, is not the one you're going to do. So it's better, as you talked about transparency and things like accountability, it is more easy to be transparent and hold certain people accountable at a district level than a national level.
All right, let me just stick with you as well as we wind up the conversation. So just sum up your submissions tonight and also give us your concluding remarks.
Okay, thank you. So I feel like Mathias Mpuuga's reforms would actually work if we as a country work on our weakness, that is the implementation. If we work on the implementation, then that necessarily means that certain reforms that he has put, things like access, allowing prisoners to vote, things like the age term limit and the term limit and all the reforms that he has put that are actually able to be put into our electoral system, or things in our government that are able to be done. But also, lastly, what I feel like is more important is that we need to embrace the kind of leaders that we have. Because at a point in time when we have the capacity to vote, and because these leaders we are complaining about, that kind of leadership, it's us who put them into this kind of positions or put them in this kind of power and all that. That is why you're going to see people quarreling things like corruption and all that. But we force these people to do certain things because we over-demand from them, or we also over-ask for certain things that it's out of their reach and all that, because as we already told you, have kind of divisions. So for an MP to access certain powers, they need to first go through a specific person and all that. So basically, we need to kind of understand as we are going into the electoral system and all that, because I understand primaries are coming out, but we need to understand the people we are pushing out there for better service delivery. Yeah.
All right, Aineplan.
All right, as we wind up, I want to push this in the face of Ugandans. Let's not be so much infringed with the political affiliations, because we actually suffer the same problems. The same problems a guy of NUP suffers, the same problems someone from NRM suffers. Once the laws are not proper, you won't approach the Lord, and he will tell you, since you are of NRM, use the flyover. Since you are of FDC, then suffer the whole. So it means it is, as it is a responsibility of the village to raise a child, let it be a collective responsibility for us to fight for what we want. Let's not keep over-blaming the leaders when we are actually the ones with the powers in our hands. So as we approach the elections, let it be a mandate of importance. Let's advocate for what is right. Let's vote leaders, not because we know them, not because they are of this tribe, or they are of this region, because all that has nothing to deal with quality. What we should fight for is quality and delivery of services, efficient service delivery. As long as the system is working, then everything, we wouldn't even be advocating for all these reforms. But the reforms are so crucial in a matter that many Ugandans are suffering. That's why everyone is looking at the reform as a remedy to all the problems we are suffering. So as we approach the elections, I really bring it on all Ugandans to have a keen eye and put some good lens in scrutinizing who a leader is without looking at the heavy or at the weight of the handout behind what you're receiving. Otherwise, I'm happy and really I extend the gratitude to the panelists here for having allowed at this time to discuss matters of national importance.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Emmanuel.
Thank you so much, Drake. I want to conclude by just one thing, and that is to state and emphasize that good is good and bad is bad, irrespective of numbers. Wrong and bad are what they are, simply on pure conscientiousness and not many verses that you. What am I saying? That our sight and our vision as Ugandans should be beyond our affiliation to political parties and to what we believe in, the faith and whatnot. It should be at a broader objective, the broader spectrum, which is our country, Uganda. So as we get to this political season, like the rest of the panelists have stated, we should strive to fight for that is good, and rub that is bad. Because at the end of the day, it affects us all. This effect is positive and negative depending on what we choose and what we relate. So we must learn to discern irrespective of the colors that we subscribe to. That's honestly what I must say. That put aside, it's been a nice afternoon sharing with the rest of you panelists. It's been glad having this discourse with you. Thank you so much, Drake, for having me always, and to the crew and you, our honorable viewers, good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the panelists, Emmanuel, Sharon, and Aineplan for taking time and giving us these wonderful insights in this conversation. Personally, I've enjoyed the show and I've enjoyed the discourse. It was quite engaging, but also interactive, but informative above all. Otherwise, to the technical crew, Paul, Brittany, and Ronald for making this possible, Civic Space TV, Center for Constitutional Governance, for bringing this to us, and to you, our dear esteemed viewers, thank you very much for following through up until the end. My name is Douglas Drake Onen. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.